Friday, December 15th. Another week, a little less than a week. Sidereal clock will continue to spin, but daylight will last longer and longer. It's going to be harder and harder to capture the NGC studies as the sky goes into a reverse rotation from what I've been experiencing since the end of summer. The scope has already been set up. Jupiter is about halfway ascended. We're not going to see it into the handheld camera because I got it tuned for the luminosity of the screen. I'm going to mount it on the scope. One of the first things I want to do is have a look at NGC185, a satellite galaxy of Messier 31, which was partially blocked last night. Well, as it turned out, NGC 185 is being blocked by the roof of the observatory. So let's move on and have our early view of another study of interest before we launch into the NGC 200-249 series. And what I'm going to do during this is I'm going to determine how long it takes for it to fully reveal, even though theoretically it should only take about 20 seconds to be able to fully capture all the photons that the scope, 6-inch scope is able to do. I want to see how long it's going to take for Messier 33 to reveal itself. Looks like I'm going to have to do a little bit of synchronization of the scope. Based on it afterwards, I had used Alpha Persei as the original synchronization star for the scope alignment, but it is not playing out particularly well with Messier 33. And that looks about as good of a view as we're going to get. So let's bail on this, and I'm going to recenter it, and then we'll go on to the NGC 200-249 series. All right, I just centered up and synchronized the scope to the core of the triangulum galaxy, Messier 33. That's our view. You can see the core region, spiral arms wrapping around it, giving it almost a sense of being a ring galaxy, although that's not the full extent. We're only seeing the spiral extensions around the middle, I would say 15 arc to 20 arc minutes of the galaxy, although you can see a spiral arm heading off in that direction there, which is probably 15 arc minutes across. The galaxy itself is at its widest about over 1 degree in apparent size. Okay, there's our look. Promising for the evening. Let's go on to NGC 200. NGC 200 is a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 12.6, brightish, fairly small, 1.7 by 1 arc minute, spiral with a bar, lowercase bc, 227 million light years distant. Probably means it's a little larger than our own galaxy, the Milky Way. We're at plus almost 3 degrees in declination. You can see there are potentially several galaxies in the 20 by 15 arc minute 75x field of view provided by the Rev2 system through the F8 150 millimeter ED lens refractor, Skywatcher refractor that is in the backyard observatory. I refer to as Penti because it's pentagonal in shape. Not too far south of NGC 200 is NGC 201. However, this galaxy is in Cetus the Whale, so northern Cetus. We're about 1 degree above the celestial equator, only slightly fainter at magnitude 12.9 and larger, 1.8 by 1.5 arc minutes. This is a spiral with a bar, 196 million light years distant, which probably puts it at about maybe 120,000 light years in diameter. So you should watch the screen to see as galaxies develop. Stars tend to pop right out, galaxies take at least 20 seconds to reveal themselves fully on the screen. I should warn you that there are high-thin clouds this evening, as they tend to be as we approach winter, with water vapor condensing in the atmosphere. And that even though we got a pretty decent view of the triangular galaxy, it doesn't mean it's going to translate to every part of the sky. Excuse me, NGC202 is a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 14.3, 0.9 by 0.3 arc minutes in size, a supra, I would call it a class 6 or a supra edge-on galaxy. It's a spiral with a lowercase a. 180 million light years distant means it's probably somewhere around 70,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 3.5 degrees in declination. Barely a click away from NGC202 in Pisces is NGC203, a galaxy. It's also known as NGC211. It's magnitude 14.9 by 0.3 arc minutes, a lenticular spiral, so a fairly mature galaxy, 236 million light years distant, puts it at about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 3.5 degrees, and as I said, NGC202 should also be somewhere on the screen. A little bit more of a jump away from NGC203, that galaxy in Pisces, is 204, another galaxy, magnitude 12.9, face on 1.2 by 1.2 arc minutes. It's a lenticular spiral, class O, 241 million light years distant, probably puts it at around maybe 85,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 3.25 degrees, and we're into minute 39 of the right ascension. And these studies are pretty much culminating at this point, so we may very well lose studies that are above, let's say, 32 to 35 degrees in declination. Here we are having a partially blocked view of NGC205, galaxy in Andromeda. It has another name, Messier 110. Magnitude 8.1, large, 19.5 by 11.5 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a capital A and an O. So I'm not sure, I haven't encountered those capital AOs. It's a mere 2.5 million light years distant, gravitationally bound, and very close to Messier 31, which also will probably pop up this evening with an NGC designation. We're at plus 41 degrees. The fact that we're getting a halfway decent view of it, despite the scope being partially blocked by the roof try, is actually quite suggestive of a decent night of transparency. Well, I think I'm seeing some kind of residual image of Messier 110 at this point, but what we should be seeing here is NGC 206. It's an open cluster in Andromeda. It's actually located within Messier 31, magnitude 12.8, 1.8 by 0.6 arc minutes, 2.5 million light years distant, plus 40 degrees. So what we're probably seeing there is some luminosity from Messier 31 itself, and a 12.8 magnitude open cluster would be really very difficult to actually resolve any stars. So that luminosity we're seeing right there may very well be the open cluster, which is very oblate at 1.8 by 0.6 arc minutes. NGC207 is a galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14.5, 0.9 by 0.54 arc minutes, so pretty much a class 4, in my estimation, a oblately presented galaxy in terms of presentation. Spiral with a lowercase a, 176 million light years distant, puts it at about 60,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 14 degrees, and you can tell that because the screen is pretty much washed out, although I think the galaxy is quite visible. Headed a bit north to NGC208, a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 14.3, smallish, 0.7 by 0.7 face-on spiral with a lowercase a, 230 million light years distant, so maybe about 70,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 2.75 degrees. declination. NGC209 is another galaxy in Cetus the Whale, brightish, magnitude 12.9, 1.3 by 1.1 arc minutes, a lenticular spiral class O, 175 million light years distant, probably between 80 and 90,000 light years in diameter. However, we are at minus 18.5 degrees declination, although the galaxy is quite visible. NGC210 is another galaxy in Cetus. This one's bright and largish. Magnitude 10.9, 4.6 by 3.2 arc minutes. Spiral with a bar in lowercase b. 71 million light years distant. Probably puts it somewhere around a little larger than the Milky Way, maybe 110,000 light years in diameter. However, we are at minus 14 degrees, which is why we're not really getting a sense of structure, although it looks kind of rung about with luminosity, although I wouldn't call it a ring. Looking over NGC211, which was also NGC203, we've now jumped to NGC213, probably 212 was a too far south galaxy. This is a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 13.3, 1.7 by 1.5, kind of a football shape presentation. Spiral with a bar in lowercase a. 248 million light years distant, probably puts it at about 120,000 light years in diameter. We are at plus 16.5 degrees in declination. NGC214 is another galaxy. This one's in Andromeda. It's magnitude 12.3. 1.9 by 1.5 arc minutes, spiral with a bar in lowercase c. 201 million light years distant means it's probably about 125,000 light years in diameter. It's at plus 25.5 degrees, and we're getting a fairly decent view of it. NGC216 is another deep south galaxy. This one's in Cetus, minus 21 degrees. It's magnitude 13.2, 2 by 0.7 arc minutes, so super edge on or a suboblate. Spiral of lenticular class, 69 million light years distant, so actually quite small, maybe 30 to 40,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 21 degrees. NGC217 is another galaxy in Cetus, but further north. We're at minus 10 degrees. It's magnitude 13.5, pretty edgy on, 2.7 by 0.6 arc minutes, which is quite apparent looking at the screen. We're at minus 10 degrees. As mentioned, we're at 41 minutes in terms of sidereal time. But I can see extensions on this galaxy, so very nice. Almost on the zenith with some scope blockage, we have NGC218, a galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 14, face on 1.1 by 1.1. It's a spiral with a lowercase p, which means peculiarities. 223 million light years distant. It's at plus 36 degrees. So we are being a bit pressed because things are getting very close to culminating right now. And the roof try is obstructed. NGC219 is another galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14.3, smallish, 0.5 by 0.4 arc minutes, which means it's in the 30 arc second range of size. It's an elliptical 246 million light years distant, therefore it's probably only about 30,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus almost 1 degree in declination. That very bright star-like looking thing near the middle of the screen and slightly towards the top is NGC221. It's 2.6 million light years distant. It's called an elliptical galaxy of a class 2, so it's more like a globular cluster, really. It's got another name, and you might guess it, Messier 32, magnitude 8.1, 8.5 by 6.5 arc minutes, and we're at plus almost 41 degrees, so you know we're getting a little bit of obstruction on this baby. Once again, returning south to Cetus, NGC223, galaxy, magnitude 13.2, 1.3 by 0.9 arc minutes, pretty much a football-shaped galaxy. Spiral with a lenticular O class, but it's got an A and some peculiarities. 241 million light years distant, probably about 90,000 to almost the size of our Milky Way, and we're almost 1 degree above the celestial equator. Let's watch this one develop. It's NGC224. I'll give you the data on it. Very bright, isn't it? And large. Well, what we're seeing there is the core of Messier 31. NGC224, like KA224, is a galaxy in Andromeda. Messier 31, magnitude 3.4, 189 by 61 arc minutes, spiral with a lowercase b, 2.5 million light years distant, plus 41 degrees. We are getting some obstruction, but it's such a brilliant galaxy it probably hardly matters, and it does tend to overwhelm the screen. This, of course, is our standard candle galaxy for determining 1, size, and 2, relative luminosity. By using the values associated with Messier 31, we can get a sense of whether or not a galaxy is more mature in terms of converting its cold dark matter into stars or less. And we know from our astronomical publications that although Messier 31 is about 50% larger than the Milky Way actually has more mass, which means it is likely to contribute the most to whatever super galaxy emerges after Messier 31 and the Milky Way, and other galaxies in our local group merge in about 3 to 4 billion years. Something to look forward to. NGC226 is another galaxy in Andromeda, but thankfully a little further south. I don't think we're getting any roof dry obstruction, possibly a little. It's magnitude 13.3, almost an arc minute in size, face on, 0.9 by 0.9. It is called a peculiar galaxy. It's 218 million light years distant. By peculiar, it's probably recently gone through the process of absorbing neighboring galaxies, just as I just mentioned when it comes to our own Milky Way and Messier 31. We're at plus 32.5 degrees in declination. NGC227 is a galaxy in Cetus, brightish, magnitude 12.1, 1.5 by 1.2 arc minutes. It's an elliptical type 2, and you can tell that from its aspect ratio of 1.5 to 1.2. 238 million light years distant. I'd say this is at least as large as our own Milky Way. We're at minus 1.5 degrees in declination. NGC228 is another galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 13.7, pretty face on, 1.2 by 1.1 arc minute, spiral with a bar and a lowercase ab, and a ring. I don't think we'll get a view of the ring, given its magnitude, which are typically 4.5 magnitudes fainter than the galaxy as a whole. We are at plus 23.5 degrees. I will give it a moment as I press the next button for NGC229. And hasta la vista. You should be able to find NGC228 in the same field with NGC229 because there was nary a click of the stepper motors in going to it. It's a galaxy in Andromeda, but it's fainter. Magnitude 14.5, but its aspect ratio of 1 to 0.4 might give it away. Spiral with peculiarities, 326 million light years distant, puts it at about a little larger than our own Milky Way galaxy. We're at plus 23.5 degrees in declination. NGC230 is a galaxy in Cetus, pretty far south and not a bad view. We're at minus 23.5 degrees declination. The galaxy's magnitude 14.7, edge on 1.1 by 0.2 arc minute spiral with a lowercase a. I'm not seeing anything particular. Well, maybe this one right here is our edge on baby. 302 million light years distant, puts it about the size of the Milky Way. We're, as I mentioned, at minus 23.5 degrees in terms of declination. Not a bad view for that far south. NGC232 is a neighbor of the former galaxy, which I thought was, it was 231 in Cetus. Magnitude 13.5, 0.9 by 0.8 arc minute, spiral with a bar, 297 million light years distant, maybe a little smaller than the Milky Way. Minus 23.5 degrees in declination. And the previous galaxy, which I believe was 231, should be in the same field of Ew. There's probably our galaxy right there. Now looking at NGC233, there's no obstruction. We're at the galaxy in Andromeda. It's magnitude 12.4, 1.7 by 1.6 arc-minute size elliptical, 247 million light years distant. This one's somewhere between, I would say, about 130,000 light years in diameter. Very large for an elliptical. We're at plus 30.5 degrees in declination. So a distant, bright, large elliptical galaxy, NGC233. NGC234 is a galaxy in Pisces. One of these days we'll end up with an NGC1234, but for the time being, 234. Magnitude 12.5, 1.6 by 1.6 arc-minute, face-on spiral with a bar and lowercase c, and easy 200 million light years distant, probably about 110,000 light years in diameter. I gave out the equation in the previous sequence. And maybe you might want to sit down and figure some of these out using the approach articulated. We're at plus 14, almost a half degree. NGC 235A, there was no 235. The galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14, 1.3 by 0.7. So obliquely presented lenticular spiral, 300 million light years distant. We're at minus 23.5 degrees. Not a bad look. I think we are pretty much going post mid-sky at this point, and I don't expect the scope to flip for the 249 series, but I'll have to flip it over if I decide to come out again this evening for the 250 to 299 series. Well, NGC 235B is probably sharing the same space on the screen with NGC 235A. Galaxy in Cetus, once again, slightly fainter, 14.5 magnitude. A perfect 1 by 1 lenticular spiral, 302 million light years distant, and you can figure out the average surface brightness very easy. It's 1 by 1 arc minutes, magnitude 14.5. I'll leave that for you to puzzle over. We're at minus 23.5 degrees in declination. Heading north into Pisces for NGC 236 galaxy. Magnitude 13.5, 1.2 by 1 arc-minute spiral with a lowercase c, 253 million light years distant, plus almost 3 degrees. I'd say it's probably around 85,000 light years in diameter, based on Messier 31's published spec. Everything looks a little bit fuzzy there. I wonder if we're getting some high thin clouds at this point, but I'm going to push on anyway because I haven't got much of an observing season left to capture these early NGC studies. NGC 237 is another galaxy in Cetus the Whale, magnitude 13, 1.6 by 0.9 arc minutes, almost a 2-to-1 aspect ratio, very nice. Spiral with a bar and lowercase c, 186 million light years distant. We are at minus, we'll just call it 0, right along the celestial equator. A little further south in Cetus to NGC 239, we're about almost minus 4 degrees, declination, is magnitude 14.8, NGC 239. 1 by 0.5, perfectly oblate, what I'd call a class 4 presentation galaxy. Spiral with lowercase ab. 167 million light years distant, probably puts it around 65,000 light years in diameter. As mentioned, we're at almost minus 4 degrees in declination. The galaxy is right there. NGC 240 is a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 13.5, 1 by 0.9 arc-minute spiral with a lowercase a and a ring. This galaxy is 547 million light years distant, which means it's probably got about a redshift factor of 0.04. Based on research I just did today. We're at plus 6 degrees. So not bad. 547 million light years distant means it's probably somewhere around 180,000 light years in diameter. Okay, we're might be getting a slight obstruction on this one. Look, there's red in the screen from reflected street lamps. This is NGC243, a galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 13.6, 0.9 by 0.4, oblately presented spiral with peculiarities, 220 million light years distant, and almost plus 30 degrees. We're definitely post-culminatory now, so we're going to be suffering for the next 6 or 7 studies, especially if they're further north, in terms of how much light we can gather. NGC244 is another galaxy in Cetus. Magnitude 13.7, 1.2 by 1 arc-minute spiral of the lenticular class with peculiarities, a mere 44 million light years distant. Which means this one isn't very large, maybe 25,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 15.5 degrees. And there's our look. I can see the galaxy on the screen, and that's not a bad view for minus 15.5 degrees in terms of obscuration caused by atmosphere. Another galaxy in Cetus, but this one's further north. Almost a little less than 2 degrees before the celestial equator is NGC245. Magnitude 12.2, 1.3 by 1.1, 183 million light years, probably about 75 to 80,000 light years in diameter, spiral with a lowercase b. There's our view, and my battery is starting to discharge both due to use and the cold in the Sony Handycam. Okay, very nice. We got a little break from a galaxy. NGC246 is a planetary nebula in Cetus. Magnitude 10.4, 240 by 210 arc seconds, so it should be quite large. However, I'm having difficulty. Whoa! Oh, I can see it. There's a ring around that central star. Wow! That is very unusually unique. It's 1,500 light years in diameter. Its central star is magnitude 11.9. It's at almost 12 degrees in declination, and we're at 47 minutes of right ascension. I hope we're capturing. I do see the ring on the Sony Handycam. I'm going to give it a moment to continue to develop. We're going to go to another galaxy in Cetus, but this one is very large. I'm not sure we're going to see much of it. So, adios to the planetary nebula, and let me go ahead and navigate to the NGC247. Not sure we're going to see much of NGC247. Galaxy in Cetus, bright, magnitude 9.1, large, 21 by 5.6 arc minutes, which means it's probably average surface brightness about magnitude 16.5. I am seeing the central core right there, so at least we've got that. And it's also at minus almost 21 degrees in declination. This is the kind of galaxy you want to have a look at with the lowest possible power and largest aperture. I can see the extensions on it pretty much like that. Wow. Be very interesting to bump up the exposure time a little bit on this one, but I can't be doing that right away. Maybe I'll file NGC247 away for a later view using 256 flood instead of 128, which adds about 0.8 magnitudes to the scope's reach, but makes it very sensitive to vibrations. So that's a view of NGC247. All right. There was no 248 or 49 in the database. Must have been too far south. What you're looking at here is a presentiment to NGC250, a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 13.6, oblate, 1.1 by 0.6 arc-minute spiral, 236 million light years distant. It's at plus almost 8 degrees. This will be our carpe noctem. I need to charge the battery in the Handycam. Potentially, if I'm not too chilled out and it doesn't take too long, I'll come back out and capture the 250 to 299 series later this evening, but the scope will definitely have to do an equatorial flip to do so, because we are now post-culminatory and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour for the battery to charge. But it worked out pretty well last night, so I may very well give it another shot this evening to get caught up on the NGC SkyQuest series. Carpe Noctem.